When a hurricane hits the United States, the government looks at three things: weather reports, emergency calls, and strangely, Waffle House. Because if a Waffle House closes, officials know the disaster is serious. It's called the Waffle House Index, and it's used by FEMA to judge how bad a crisis really is. And that might sound like a joke. After all, how could a diner chain known for waffles, greasy hash browns, and late-night college crowds possibly help measure natural disasters? But according to emergency officials, Waffle House is one of the most reliable indicators of how devastated an area really is. Because while most businesses shut down during storms, Waffle House usually stays open. During hurricanes, during floods, during blizzards, even during power outages. There are countless stories of customers eating waffles while hurricane winds howl outside the building. So the obvious question is, why? Why does this one restaurant chain refuse to close when everything else shuts down? And how did a simple roadside diner become one of the most disaster-resilient businesses in America? To understand that, we have to go back to the beginning. The story starts in 1955 in Avondale Estates, Georgia. Two men had an idea for a different kind of restaurant. One of them was Joe Rogers Sr., a restaurant manager who had spent years working in the food industry. The other was Tom Faulkner, a real estate developer who knew exactly where new businesses should be built. Together, they wanted to create something simple, a restaurant where people could sit down, eat quickly, and feel welcome at any hour of the day. And in the 1950s, that idea was actually pretty unusual. Most restaurants closed early. Many diners shut their doors overnight. But Rogers and Faulkner saw an opportunity. Factories ran overnight shifts. Truck drivers traveled through the night. Police officers, nurses, and construction workers often worked strange hours. And all of those people still needed somewhere to eat. So they made a bold decision. Their restaurant would stay open 24 hours a day. Not just on weekends, not just during busy seasons, all the time. And to emphasize that idea, they named the restaurant something simple and comforting: Waffle House, because waffles were warm, familiar, and easy to cook quickly. The first restaurant opened with just 4 employees and a small menu, but the concept worked immediately. Customers loved knowing they could walk into a Waffle House at 3 in the morning and still get a hot meal. And as the business grew, the company leaned harder and harder into that identity. Waffle House wasn't just a restaurant, it was the place that never closed. As Waffle House expanded across the American South, something interesting began to happen. The restaurants became part of their communities, not just during breakfast or lunch, but during the strangest hours of the day. Police officers stopped in during night shifts. Truck drivers relied on them during long trips. College students flooded them after midnight. But there was another group of people who relied on Waffle House even more: emergency workers. Because when disasters hit, most businesses shut down immediately, but Waffle House often stayed open. Sometimes employees slept in the restaurant overnight so they could keep serving customers. Sometimes staff members walked through flooded streets just to get to work. In fact, many longtime Waffle House employees tell stories of cooking food while storms were literally shaking the building. But this wasn't reckless behavior, it was part of the company's culture. Waffle House had built its reputation on being reliable. If customers expected the restaurant to be open, then the company did everything possible to make sure it stayed that way. And eventually, that reputation caught the attention of an unexpected group of people: disaster response officials. Because when storms hit the southern United States, Waffle House locations were often one of the last businesses still operating, and that made them extremely useful. The term Waffle House Index was created by Craig Fugate, the former administrator of FEMA. Before leading FEMA, Fugate had worked in emergency management for years in the state of Florida, which meant he had dealt with hurricanes constantly. During those disasters, Fugate noticed something strange. Whenever emergency teams entered a damaged area, they could often judge how bad the situation was by checking one thing: was the local Waffle House open? If it was, and serving a full menu, the area probably hadn't taken much damage. If it was open but serving a limited menu, the area likely had power outages or supply problems. But if the Waffle House was completely closed, that meant the damage was probably severe. Eventually, Fugate started joking about this observation with colleagues. He called it the Waffle House Index, but the idea was actually very practical, because Waffle House restaurants are usually located along major highways and in populated communities, which means if a Waffle House can't open, it's likely that the surrounding infrastructure has been heavily damaged. Roads may be blocked, Electricity may be out. Water systems may be compromised. In other words, a closed Waffle House is often a sign that the community needs serious help. And once FEMA started mentioning the Waffle House Index publicly, the story spread everywhere. Suddenly, the humble diner chain had become part of disaster response folklore. But the real reason Waffle House stays open during disasters isn't just company pride. It's something much more organized. Behind the scenes, Waffle House has developed an incredibly detailed disaster response system. Whenever a major storm is predicted, the company activates a series of preparations. Food deliveries are increased, supplies are stocked, backup generators are checked. Employees are scheduled in advance so that restaurants can operate even if some workers can't make it in. Some locations even store extra ingredients to last through extended emergencies. But one of the most interesting parts of this system is the disaster menu. During normal times, Waffle House offers a full menu, but when disasters strike, the restaurant switches to a simplified version. The disaster menu focuses on foods that are quick to cook, easy to prepare, and possible to make with limited electricity. Things like eggs, toast, and hash browns. The goal isn't to offer every item, the goal is to keep feeding people. And because the restaurants are small and relatively simple compared to most fast food chains, they can often reopen very quickly after a storm passes. In many cases, Waffle House locations are among the first businesses to reopen after disasters, which is why emergency workers sometimes eat there while coordinating recovery efforts. But even Waffle House has its limits. Despite its reputation, Waffle House doesn't stay open no matter what. There have been disasters so severe that even these famously stubborn diners had to shut their doors. One of the most famous examples happened during Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Katrina devastated large parts of the Gulf Coast. Entire cities were flooded. Power grids collapsed. Transportation systems stopped working. Many Waffle House locations were forced to close because the buildings themselves were damaged or inaccessible. For FEMA officials, this confirmed what they had already suspected. If a Waffle House closes, the situation is probably extremely serious. And while closures are rare, they do happen during the worst disasters. In fact, during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, hundreds of Waffle House restaurants closed temporarily. For a company that had built its identity around staying open, that was an unprecedented moment. But the closures also showed something important. Waffle House doesn't stay open because it's careless. It stays open because it's prepared. And preparation is the real secret behind the Waffle House Index. Today, Waffle House has more than 2,000 locations across the United States. And in many communities, it represents something more than just a place to eat. It's a symbol of normal life. When the lights are on, when the grill is hot, when someone is serving coffee at the counter, it means the community is still standing. That's why emergency officials pay attention to Waffle House. Because when disasters hit, data can be slow, reports can be delayed. But the status of a small diner on the corner, that tells you a lot. If the Waffle House is open, things might be okay. If it's running a limited menu, the area might be struggling. But if the Waffle House is closed, you know something serious has happened. And that's how a simple restaurant chain ended up becoming one of the most unusual disaster indicators in America. If you enjoyed this story and want more fascinating food history, make sure to subscribe to Eat This Story, because sometimes the most interesting stories in the world are hiding in the places we eat every day. I'll see you in the next one.